Woke up feeling tired, fat, and gay. This is... I'm such a chud. I'm actually such a chud, dude. I feel like such a chud. I don't even know why, because nothing bad is really going on in my life, but I just feel like a chud. Well, what the bad thing that's happening is my parents just said, we need to talk. And I'm like, girl, about what? About what? About what, girl? I'm scared. And there was just this random circle in my toilet. Like this random circle that was like maybe this big. It was like a disc, a random black disc in my toilet that was about this big. I'm like, what is that? I don't know what that is. I actually didn't even know what that was. It freaking scared me. I just flushed it because I'm like, oh my god, first of all, my ex has a key to my apartment. I didn't even know this, but he copied the key. And so what, did he put a bomb in my toilet? Like, what is that? Like, what is it? So I just flushed it, and then I peed, and then I left. Girl, I'm scared. Okay. Next. Okay, Anna Karenina, chapter 10. From that time, a new life began for Karenin and his wife. Nothing particular happened. Anna went into society as before, frequently visiting the Princess Betsy, and she met Vronsky everywhere. Karenina noticed this, but could do nothing. She met all his efforts to bring about an explanation by presenting an impenetrable wall of merry perplexity. Externally, things seemed as before, but their intimate relations with one another were completely changed. Karenin, strong as he was in his official activities, felt himself powerless here. Like an ox, he waited submissively with bowed head for the pole-axe, which he felt was raised above him. Each time he began to think about it, he felt that he must try again, that by kindness, tenderness, and persuasion, there was still a hope of saving her and obliging her to bethink herself. Every day he prepared himself to have a talk with her, but each time he began to speak with her, he felt the same spirit of evil and falsehood which had taken possession of her master, him also. And he neither said the things he meant to, nor spoke in the tone he had meant to adopt. He spoke involuntarily in his habitual, half-bantering tone, which seemed to make fun of those who said such things seriously, and in that tone it was impossible to say what had to be said to her. Okay. Part 2, chapter 11. That which for nearly a year, damn, year's crazy, by the way. Year-long situationship. Year-long, oh my god. Had been Vronsky's sole and exclusive desire, supplanting all his former desires. That which for Anna had been an impossible, dreadful, but all the more bewitching dream of happiness had come to pass. Pale, with trembling lower jaw, he stood over her, entreating her to be calm, himself not knowing why or how. Anna, he said in a trembling voice. Anna, for God's sake! But the louder he spoke, the lower she drooped her once proud, bright, but now dishonored head, and she writhed, slipping down from the sofa on which she sat to the floor at his feet. She would have fallen on the carpet if he had not held her. Oh, wait, no, that's Vronsky saying that. My God, forgive me, she said, sobbing and pressing Vronsky's hand to her breast. Ooh! I've dated someone for 2 years, and I never even let them touch my boobs. Baller life, celibate life. She felt so guilty, so much to blame, that it only remained for her to humble herself and ask to be forgiven. But she had no one in the world now except him, so that even her prayer for forgiveness was addressed to him. Looking at him, she felt her degradation physically, and could say nothing more. He felt what a murderer must feel when looking at the body he has deprived of life. The body he had deprived of life was their love, the first period of their love. There was something frightful and revolting in the recollection of what had been paid for with this terrible price of shame. The shame she felt at her spiritual nakedness communicated itself to him. But in spite of the murderer's horror of the body of his victim, the body must be cut in pieces and hidden away, and he must make use of what he had obtained by the murder. Then, as the murderer desperately throws himself on the body, as though with passion, and drags it and hacks it, so Vronsky covered her face and shoulders with kisses. Ooh, Tolstoy, you are treating us good. I'm kind of on book talk right now. Tolstoy, you're like kind of treating us good with this. She held his hand and did not move. Yes, these kisses were what had been bought by their shame. Yes, and this hand, which will always be mine, is the hand of my accomplice. She lifted his hand and kissed it. He knelt down and tried to see her face, but she hid it and did not speak. At last, as though mastering herself, she sat up and pushed him away. Her face was beautiful as ever, but all the more piteous. "It's all over," she said. "I have nothing but you left. Remember that." "I cannot help remembering what life itself is to me for one moment of that bliss." "What bliss?" she said, with disgust and horror, and the horror was involuntarily communicated to him. For heaven's sake, not another word!" She rose quickly and moved away from him. "Not another word," she repeated, and with a look of cold despair strange to him, she left him. She felt that at that moment she could not express in words her feeling of shame, joy, and horror at this entrance on a new life, and she did not wish to vulgarize that feeling by inadequate words. Later on, the next day and the next, she still could not find words to describe all the complexity of those feelings, and could not even find thoughts with which to reflect on all that was in her soul. She said to herself, "No, I can't think about it now. Later, when I am calmer." But that calm necessary for reflection never came. Every time she thought of what she had done, and of what was to become of her, and what she should do, came to her mind, she was seized with horror and drove these thoughts away. Now, later, when I am calmer," she said to herself. But in her dreams, when she had no control over her thoughts, her position appeared to her all in its shocking nakedness. One dream she had almost every night. She dreamt that both at once were her husbands, and lavished their caresses on her. Alex Alexandrovitch wept, kissing her hands, saying, that's the husband, sorry. "How beautiful is it now?" And Alexis Vronsky was there too. And he was also her husband. And laughingly explained to them how much simpler it really was, and that they were both now contented and happy. But this dream weighed on her like a nightmare, and she woke from it filled with horror. Okay, challengers tease. Okay. Alright. When Levin first returned from Moscow, and while he still started and blushed every time he remembered the disgrace of the refusal, he said to himself, "I blushed and started like this when I was plowed in physics and had to remain in the second class, and in the same way I felt myself lost when I made a mess of my sister's affair that had been entrusted to me. And what happened? Now that years have passed, when I remember it, I'm surprised that it could grieve so much. So it will be with this grief. Time will pass and I shall become indifferent." But 3 months passed, and he had not become indifferent to it, and to think of it still hurt him, as it had done in the first few days. He could not find peace, because he had so long dreamed of family life and felt so ripe for it, but was still unmarried and further than ever from marriage. He himself felt painfully what all those around him felt too, that it is not good for a man of his age to be alone. He remembered how, just before leaving for Moscow, he had said to Nicholas, his cowman, a naive peasant with whom he liked to talk, "Well, Nicholas, I want to get married." And how Nicholas had promptly replied, as on a matter about which could be no doubt. This is like his brother, right? I forgot what voice I gave the brother. I gave him a British voice, right? Because he's I don't know. "And it is high time, Konstantin Dmitrich." But now he was further from marriage than ever. The place was unoccupied, and when in imagination he tried to put on one of the girls he knew there, he felt that it was quite impossible. Moreover, the memory of her refusal, and the part that he had played in it, tormented him with shame. However, much he told himself that he was not at all to blame in that matter. The memory of it, together with other shameful memories, made him start and blush. There had been in his past, as in that of every man, actions which he realized were bad, and for which his conscience ought to have tormented him, but the recollections of those bad actions did not torment him nearly as much as these trivial yet shameful memories. These wounds never closed up, and among these recollections stood the memory of her refusal and the pitiful role he must have played in the eyes of the others that evening. But time and work told. The painful memories became more and more covered over by the commonplace but important events of country life. Every week he thought less and less about Kitty. He waited impatiently to hear that she was married or was getting married soon, hoping that such news, like the drawing of an aching tooth, would quite cure him. Meanwhile, spring had come, a glorious, steady spring, without the expectations and disappointments spring usually brings. It was one of these rare springs which plants, animals, and men alike rejoice in. This lovely spring roused Levin still more and confirmed him in the determination completely to renounce the past, in order to fashion his solitary life firmly and independently. Though he had not carried out many of the plans with which he had returned to the country from Moscow, he had held to the most important one, that of living a pure life, and he was not experiencing the shame which used to torment him when he had fallen, but was able to look people boldly in the face. Already in February he had received a letter from Mary Nikolaevna to say that his brother Nicholas's health was getting worse, but that he could not submit to any treatment. In consequence of this news, Levin went to Moscow, saw his brother, and managed to persuade him to consult a doctor and go to a watering place abroad. He was so successful in persuading his brother and in lending him money for the journey without irritating him, that he was satisfied with himself in respect. Besides his agricultural pursuits, which required special attention in spring, and besides reading, Levin had another occupation. He had that winter begun writing a book on agriculture, the basis of which was the character of labor was treated as a definite factor, like climate and soil, and that therefore the conclusions of agricultural science should not be deduced from data supplied by climate and soil only, but from data of climate, soil, and the immutable character of the laborer, so that in spite of his solitary life, or rather because of it, his time was completely filled up. Only occasionally he felt an unsatisfied desire to share with someone besides Agatha Mikavlonia the thoughts that wandered through his brain, for even with her he often discussed physics, agricultural theories, and especially philosophy, which last was her favorite subject. The spring had set in late. During the last week of Lent, the weather had been clear and frosty. It thawed in the sunshine by day, but at night the thermometer went down to 16 degrees Fahrenheit. The snow was covered with a crust of ice so thick that carts could pass, even where there were no roads. Easter found snow still on the ground, but on Easter Monday a warm wind began to blow. The clouds gathered, and for 3 days and nights warm stormy rain poured down. On the Thursday the wind fell, and a thick gray mist rose, as if to hide the secret of the changes nature was carrying on. Beneath the mist the snow waters rushed down, the ice on the river cracked and moved, and the turbid forming torrents flowed quicker, till on the first Sunday after Easter, towards evening, the mist dissolved, the clouds broke into fleecy cloudlets and dispersed. The sky cleared, and the real spring was there. In the morning, the bright rising sun quickly melted the thin ice on the water, and the warm air all around vibrated with the vapor given off by the awakening earth. Last year's grass grew green again, and the new blades came up like needlepoints. Buds swelled on the guelder rose and currant bushes, and on the sticky, spicy birch trees. And among the golden catkins and on the willow branches the bees began to hum. The unseen larks burst into song above the velvety, fresh green and frozen stubble. The peewits began to cry above the water, brought down by the storm and still flooding the low-lying places and marshes, and high up the cranes and geese flew, uttering their spring call. The cattle, who had lost all but a few patches of their winter coats, began to low in the meadows. The crooked-legged lambs began to play round their bleating mothers, who were losing their wool. Swift-footed children began to run along the quickly drying paths marked with imprints of bare feet. The merry voices of women who were bleaching their linen began to chatter by the ponds. The axes of the peasants, getting ready their wooden plows and harrows, clicked in the yards. The real spring had come. Part 2, Chapter 13. Levin put on his high boots and for the first time a cloth coat instead of a fur, and went out to attend to his farm. Stepping now onto a piece of ice, now into the sticky mud, he crossed the stream of dazzling water. Spring is the time for making plans and resolutions, and Levin, like a tree which in the spring, time does not yet know in which direction and what manner its young shoots and twigs, still imprisoned in their buds, will develop, but did not quite know what work on his beloved land he was going to take in hand, but he felt that his mind was full of the finest plans and resolutions. First of all, he went to the cattle yard. The cows had been let out there, and warmed by the sunshine, their glossy new coats glistening, they were allowing to be let out into the fields. After he had for a while admired his cows, all familiar to him to the minutest detail, Levin gave orders for them to be driven onto the field and for the calves to be let out into the yard. The cowherd ran away merrily to get ready. The dairy maids, with twigs in their hands, holding their skirts up over their bare white legs, not yet sunburnt, splashed through the puddles into the yard, driving the calves, who were mad with the joy of spring. Having gazed with admiration at the exceptionally fierce, mama! Exceptionally fine calves born that year, the older ones were as big as peasants' cows, and Papa's 3-month-old calf was as big as a yearling. Levin gave orders to bring a trough of food for them and to put some hay into the racks outside, but it turned out that the racks, which had been put up in the yard and not used during winter, were broken. He sent for the carpenter, who was under contract to be with the threshing machine, but it turned out that he was mending the harrows, which should have been mended the week before Lent. This was very annoying to Levin. It was vexing that the careless farm management, against which he had struggled so many years with all his might, still continued. He found out that the racks, which were not wanted in winter, had been taken into the farm horse's stable, and there had got broken, as they were lightly made, being meant only for the calves. Besides this, it proved that the harrows and all the agricultural implements which he had ordered to be examined and mended in winter, for which purpose 3 carpenters had been specially engaged, had not been seen to, and the harrows were now being mended when it was time to start harrowing. Levin sent for the steward, but instead of waiting, went at once to look for him himself. The steward, in his astrakhan-trimmed coat, as radiant as everything else that day, was coming from the threshing ground, breaking a bit of straw in his hands. "Why is the carpenter not with the threshing machine?"
"Oh, I meant to tell you yesterday that the harrow's been mended. It's time to plow, you know."
"Why wasn't it done in winter?"
"But what do you want with a carpenter?"
"Where are the racks from the calves' yard?"
I have given orders for them to be put in their places. What is one to do with such people?
I think I gave the steward a voice already, but I low-key forgot, said the steward, waving his arm. It's not a case of such people, but of such a steward, said Levin, flaring up. Tell me what I keep you for, he shouted. But remembering that this would not help matters, he stopped in the middle of what he was saying and only sighed. Well, can we begin sowing? He asked after a pause.
It will be possible beyond Turkino tomorrow or the day after.
And the clover?
I've sent Vasily. He and Mishka are sowing, only I don't know if they will get through. It's very sticky.
How many acres?
16.
Ooh, that was a good one. Okay, whatever. Why not the loud? Shouted Levin. That they were only sowing 16 instead of 50 acres with clover was still more annoying. To grow clover successfully, it was necessary, according to both theory and his own expertise, to sow it as early as possible, almost before the snow had finished melting, and Levin could never get this done. There is no one to do it. What are you to do with such people? 3 have not come. Now Simon?
Well then, you should have let the straw wait.
So I have.
But where are the men?
Wait, I don't even... Oh, wait. I totally okay, sorry. Just swap around the dialogue, guys. Whatever.
5 are making compote.
He meant compost.
And 4 are turning the oats over. They might begin sprouting, Konstantin Dmitrich.
Levin understood very well that might begin sprouting meant that the English seed oats were already spoiling. Here again, his orders had not been obeyed. Oh dear, I didn't speak about it long ago and lay it.
Don't worry, it will all be done in good time.
Levin waved his hand angrily and went to the barn to look at the oats. Then he came back to the stable. The oats were not yet spoiled, but the men were turning them over with shovels, whereas they should have let them run down from the loft. Levin ordered them to do this, told off 2 of the men to help sow the clover, and got over his vexation with the foreman. Indeed, House MD reference! Indeed, the day was so beautiful one could not long remain angry. Ignat, he called to the coachman, who, with sleeves rolled up, was washing a carriage at the pump. Saddle me. Which, sir? Oh, Kelpick. Yes, sir. While the horse was being saddled, Levin again called the steward, who was hanging about within sight, in order to make it up with him, and began to talk about the spring work that lay before them and his plans for the estate. Cart and manure must be started early, so that it should be over before the first hay harvest, and the far field will have to be plowed continually as to keep the earth clean. We must hire labor for the hay harvest and not pay in kind. The foreman listened attentively and evidently tried to approve of his master's plans, but his face still wore that hopeless and despondent expression so familiar to Levin. This expression seemed to say,
That all very well, but it be as God wills.
Inshallah. Astaghfirullah, brother. Okay. Nothing grieved Levin so much as this matter, but it was a matter common to all the numerous stewards he had employed. They all took up the same attitude towards his plan, and therefore he now no longer grew angry with them, but he was grieved, feeling all the more stimulated to resist this, so to say, elemental force for which he could find no other name but as God wills, which always obstructed him.
We'll see if we can manage it,
said the steward. Why should you not manage it?
We must have at least 15 more laborers, but you see, they don't come. Some came today, but they wanted 70 rubles each for the summer.
Levin was silent. That force was opposing him again. He knew that, try as they would, they had never managed to get more than from 37 to 40 laborers at the proper price. 40 could be hired, but never more than 40. Yet all the same, he could not but continue the struggle. Send to Surrey and to Cherforica if they don't come. We must try to find man.
I'll send right enough,
said Vasily Frederick, the steward, despondently,
but the horses are getting weak.
We will buy some more, but I don't know, he added, laughing, that you will always want less of everything and worse. However, this year I will not let you have your way. I'll see to everything myself.
You don't sleep as much as it is, I think. It's always pleasanter for us when the master's eyes on us.
Then it's down in the Birch Valley that they're sowing the clover. I'll ride over and see, said Levin, mounting the light little bay horse, Kolpik, which the coachman had brought. You won't be able to cross the brook, Konstantin Dmitrich, the coachman called out. Well then, I'll go through the forest. and Levin rode across the muddy yard and out into the gate into the field at a brisk amble, his fresh little horse snorting at the pedals and pulling at the bridle. If he had felt light-hearted in the cattle and the farmyards, he felt still more in the fields, gently swayed by the ambling pace of his good little horse, and drinking in the warm smell with the freshness of snow and air in it, he rode through the forest over the crumbling, sinking snow that melted at each footstep, and rejoiced at the sight of each one of his trees with its swelling buds and moss reviving on its bark. When he had passed the forest, a vast expanse of velvety green unrolled before him without a single bare spot, and only sprinkled here and there in the hollows with patches of unmelted snow. He was not irritated by the sight of a peasant's horse and colt treading down the young growth. He told the peasant he meant to drive them off, nor by the jeering and stupid answer that the peasant Ipat, whom he happened to greet, gave him in reply to his question. "Well, Ipat, will it soon be time to sow?"
"We must plow first, Konstantin Dmitrich," said Ipat.
The further he went, the happier he felt, and all sorts of plans for his estate, each better than the last, presented themselves to him. To plant rows of willows with a southern aspect on all the fields, so that the snow should not remain long under them. To divide the fields, tilling 6 and keeping 3 under grass. To build a new cattle yard at the further end of the field. To dig a pond, and to make folds for the cattle for manuring purposes. Then he would have 300 destanyas of wheat, 100 potatoes, and 150 of clover, and not a single desyatina exhausted. Dreaming such dreams, carefully guiding his horse so as to not trample down his young growth, he rode up to the laborers who were sowing the clover. The cart with the seed was standing not on the border, but in a field of winter wheat, which was being cut up by the wheels and trampled by the horse's feet. Both the laborers were sitting on the narrow path between the fields, probably sharing a pipe of tobacco. The earth in the cart with which the seeds were mixed was not rubbed fine, but was pressed or frozen into lumps. On seeing the master, the laborer Vasily moved toward the cart, and Mishka began to sow. This was not right, but Levin seldom got angry with the hired men. When Vasily came up, Levin told him to take the cart and horse out to the border.
"It won't matter, sir, the wheat will recover."
"Please don't argue," said Levin, "but do as you are told."
"Yes, sir,"
answered Vasily, and he took hold of the horse's head.
"But the sewing, Konstantin Dmitrich, is getting on first rate," he said, making up to the master. "Only the walking is dreadful. You drag half a hundredweight on your boots."
"And why has the earth not been sifted?"
"Oh, but we crumble it up,"
said Vasily, taking a handful and rubbing the earth between his palms. Vasily was not to blame that they had given him unsifted earth, but it was still annoying. Having more than once successfully tested a patent remedy for conquering vexation and making all that seemed wrong right again, Levin employed it now. He looked at the strides Mishka took, dragging the enormous lumps of earth that stuck to his feet, dismounted, took the seed basket from Vasily, and prepared to sow. "Where did you stop?" Vasily pointed to a mark with his foot, and Levin began scattering the seeds and earth as best as he could. It was hard walking, and having done a row, Levin, wet with perspiration, stopped and gave back the basket.
"Mind, sir, and don't scold me for when this summer comes,"
said Vasily. "Why?" said Levin merrily, feeling that his remedy was acting well.
"Oh, you'll see when the summer comes. You'll distinguish it. You just look over where I sowed last spring, how regularly I scattered it over. Why, Konstantin Dmitrich, I don't think I could try harder if I was working for my own father. I don't like to do things badly by myself, and I see that others don't. What's good for the master is good for us too. When one looks over there, it makes one's heart rejoice," said Vasily, pointing to the field. A fine spring, isn't it, Vasily?" "It's a spring such as the old man don't remember. I've been home, and my old father has sown 3 measures of wheat. They say it has caught up the rye."
"And have you been sowing wheat long?"
"Why, it was you who taught us to sow it. The year before last, you gave us a bushel of seed yourself. We sowed a quarter of it and sold the rest."
"Well, mind and rub the lumps," said Levin, going up to his horse. "And keep an eye on Mishka. And if the clover comes up, well, you have 50 kopecks for each desyatina."
"Thank you kindly. We're grateful for you as it is."
Levin mounted his horse, and rode to the field where the clover had been sown the year before, and to another, which was deeply plowed and ready for sowing the spring wheat. The clover was coming on splendidly. It was already reviving and steadily growing green among the last year's wheat stubble. The horse sank into the ground up to its pasterns and drew each foot out of the half-thawed earth with a smacking noise. It was quite impossible to ride over the deeply plowed field. The earth bore only where there was a little ice. In the thawed furrow, the horse's legs sank in above its pasterns. The plowed land was in excellent condition. It would be possible to harrow and sow in a couple of days. Everything was beautiful and gay. Levin rode back by the way that led across the brook, hoping that the water should have gone down, and he did manage to ford the stream, scaring 2 ducks in so doing. "There must have been some snipe, too," he thought, and just as the turning to his house, he met the keeper, who confirmed his supposition. Levin rode on a trot, so as to have dinner and get his gun ready for the evening. Okay,